So we ran short of time in class last week, so we didn't really get to cover sort of the Python part of this tutorial, so I thought I'd just record a separate video to sort of walk through a little bit of this and how I would think about using Python in this context to use sort of like half automate FFmpeg in a way. So let's look at how to do this. So basically what I want to do is I want to break up my video into grid, but maybe I want to use Python to control a little bit more of those feature sets. So the way I would do that is, we know that the way to do cropping in FFmpeg is to do FFmpeg, our input video, which is going to be this test MP4, and then you use the video filter, and then you use crop equals, and this takes 4 inputs. So it takes the height, or sorry, it takes the width, the height, and then the x value, start x, and start y. And then we'll dump this into crop.mp4. Right. So this is, I could basically do this manually if I want to say, let me crop this thing in half. So I'll just like crop from the center. By default, if you remove these two, it will crop from the center point. So let's just crop from the top right, or top left, sorry. So we'll do 0, 0. And I believe if I just do this just to make sure I overwrite my stuff, this should work just fine. Option not found. Why is that? Oh, because I don't need the equal. That's why. Here we go. This is a little bit of a longer video, so it'll take a little bit longer to render and probably a little bit longer to save, which is going to be a little annoying for this. But okay, so while this downloads and we take a look at this, let's start to think about how we could automate this. So using Python, let's say that I want to maybe break this up into a couple components. Like maybe what I want to do is actually, let me just do a bunch of vertical slats. So the way I could do this is, first off, let's set a variable for our width. So I know this video is 1024 pixels. And then let's say I want to get all 4, let's just say I want to break this into 4 pieces. So for I in range 4. So this will give me I is always going to equal 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I can just print this and then look at it. Print value of I. There you go, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what I want to do now is I want to multiply I times 1024 divided by 4. So this will give me every 4 steps, or every I, it'll break me off a chunk of this, right? So if I multiply this, you'll see I got 0, 256, 512, and 768. So what can I do with this value? So now what I could do is I could take this value, and I can use this value. So let's have this equal something. So let's have this equal x position, and we'll have it equal this. And one thing to know is you want to wrap this in an int, because right now it's printing out a float, and you want to convert it to an integer. So if you just wrap it in int, that'll convert it to an integer. Go ahead and delete this. So now what I can do is I can take this value, and I know that this is going to be, so 1024 divided by 4 is 256. So let's just say I want to make this value 256. We can hard code this for now. And then I want to have the height be the same height as the input value, which is the input height. So now I'm going to say, okay, crop 256 strips, but then what I want to do is I want to automate this x value. And what I can do here is if I put this in curly brackets, and I give it x, what it will do is every time it loops through this, it's going to output a video, or it's going to output this value, what x is set to here, in here. So this will give me 4 different FFmpeg commands that will crop my video into pieces of this dimension. So it'll be 4. So what this will do then is it's going to output a file called crop. Now the problem here is that if I output this, if I run this 4 times, it's just going to keep overwriting this file, right? It's going to overwrite this file 4 times. So what I really want to do is I want to set a count value. So we'll set count equals 0. And then every time this runs, we're going to increment our count. So we'll do count plus equals 1. And then what I want to do is I want to take this value and I'm going to actually output it here. So we'll do crop dash, and then in curly brackets, we'll say count. So what this will do is now it will run 4 times, and I will get out 4 pieces of 1/4 inch, or a quarter of the width strips. 1/4 inch. It's such a silly idea. But let's do one other thing here. what if I want to change this value at some point? Like let's say I want to make this 3 or 5. Right now this value is hard-coded, right? So what we can do is we can actually make, let's make this value, so let's say w equals, and let's take this value. And actually I already see I did something wrong here, which is I didn't multiply by I. So this would have been wrong. So what I actually need to do here is I need to say, so now my width is always going to be hard-coded as this value. So I could do this with this, and I could place in w here. And then what I need to say is x is I times w, right? Because we actually want x to increment, and we don't want w to increment. So now if I run this and I download it, what I should get is, or when I run it, I should get 4 different video files, crop-0, crop-1, crop-2, crop-3, and each of them is going to be a slice of my video. So let's run this. And you'll see I'm getting output over here, 0, 1, etc., etc. So now I've got those video pieces. So let's think about how we could actually use this in using an hstack. So the next step here is that we'll want to add a line of code, and we'll want to do FFmpeg equals, or -i, and then FFmpeg can take in multiple I values and multiple input values, right? So what we'll do is we'll do copy path crop1, or crop0, -i, we'll say crop1, -i, crop2, -i, crop3. And then if you use the, I guess what is this, the backslash, this allows you to move to a second line. So you have to dump everything all in one line. So now what we want to do is we want to use our VF filter, our video filter, and we're going to take these values as inputs. So we need to wrap this in double quotes. So this value of bracket 0 refers to the first input, the second input, the third input, and the fourth input. So 0 is 1, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3. So now this is referencing all 3 of my video files here. And what I want to do is I want to do hstack equals, and then inputs. You need to tell me how many files you're going to be inputting. So in this case, I've got 4. If you put less here, it's going to throw an error. So the number of inputs that you're feeding into this goes here. And then we could save this to a variable. We could say this is something like row 1. But because there's nothing else that we want to do here, we can actually just leave that out. And what that's going to do is just going to say, like, assume this is the output file. So now we'll say strips.mp4. So if you are kind of following along, you might realize that what this is going to do is it's going to put the video together back in the exact same way that we had it. And that's fine, but it's not going to be a cool video, right? It's just going to be like the exact same video that we pulled apart, which is kind of silly. So what we could do here is we could actually change the order of these. So let's just alter the order of these here. So you could do 2 things. You could alter the order up here, or you could alter the order in this array. And I'm just going to do it here, so this way our inputs are always in the same sequence. So let's do this. So let's do 3, 1, 0, 2. So the reason I did this is I don't want any of these to match up, because where they match up, if you go 1, 2, where those are matched up, they're actually going to be the exact same video. So we'll sort of have a double block of this. So let's run this and make sure we didn't have any errors here. Name strips is not defined. Why is that? Oh, because I didn't add my backslash here. So by adding this backslash, you're saying this is all one command. Let's see. Why did I get an error message here? So greater than 1. Oh, so maybe I do have to give it an output. Let's try this. So let's say this goes to V. And then when you do this, you actually have to do -map. And then I believe you do V. Basically, this is saying this output here is what we're actually going to save to. So let's run this and see if this works. Does not exist. What did I do wrong here? Let me check out my code in other places. Oh, I have to put it in brackets. That's what I did wrong. Okay, so go back up here. No, I did do that. Let me double check. Maybe I wrote my hstack wrong. Hstack equals inputs equals 4. That should be right. So I don't think I need this. So let's figure out what I did wrong here. Oh, this can't be a VF filter. This has to be a complex filter. So we'll cover this more next week. But basically, you have to use a complex filter if you are going to do anything with multiple inputs and multiple outputs. So in order to do this sort of array setting where you're taking in multiple inputs from your input file and dumping them in here, you have to use the complex filter. And the way to write that is to do dash filter underscore complex. So now I'm doing this. This should work fine. And we will say yes to overwriting this file. And so that'll run. So I'm going to pause my recording for this to run, and I'll download it, and then we'll look at it and make sure it worked correctly. Okay, so I've that finished rendering. I've downloaded my file, and let's take a look at it. So if we play this, we'll see that it looks pretty cool. It's our 4 strips, and what we did is we took the 4 strips of video and we like sort of resequenced them. So we get sort of like this. You can tell they're kind of all part of the same video, but they're also like they look different because of this transformation. One thing I want to do is I want to go back to my code because as I was looking at it while I was waiting for this stuff to download, I realized I made a couple stupid errors, and some of you are probably screaming at your TV, or I guess whatever you're watching this on, and like, what are you doing? What are you doing? So the first thing is that I am overwriting my W variable, right? This is kind of silly. I've set a W variable to be the width, and I'm overwriting it down here, and I'm using it here. Pretty gnarly code. Not exactly the best use of this. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit. So I'm actually going to change the name of this variable to be CW. This is going to be crop width, and we'll use this down here, and we'll also use this here. And then I want to use this variable, which is my W variable, here. So now I have a little bit more of a cleaner system. The nice thing is that now I could change the variable for my width. Like let's say I upload a different video, and this would still work, right? So I could change the width, and then I've got a thing that's pretty flexible. Now there's one other way to make this a little bit more flexible, and the way to do this would be to update this counter. So let's say, what if I want to do this with 5 pieces? Well, then I'd have to update variables in a couple different places. So let's create a variable called nstrips. This will be the number of strips I want, and then we'll use this here and here. So now I could update this to be, let's say, 8. I could change my width, and I would still get the right pieces, all according to this code. Now, I should note that this would work fine, but now this is a little bit messier, right? Because now I've got 8 files, and I would have to like automatically enter these in one by one, which is not ideal. You know, let's say I made this 40. You definitely wouldn't want to do that, right? You wouldn't want to manually enter in 40 pieces of code. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to create another variable, and we're going to call it input string. And we are going to set it equal to an empty string. And then every time we run this cell, or run through this loop, what we're going to do is we're going to add to that input string. Plus equals. And then what it needs to equal is it needs to equal -i. And then /content. And then this exact path. So just this. Paste that in there. And then at the end, we want to add a space, right? Because as we add up the string, we want to make sure we account for this space here. So there's one other thing we need to do, which is to fix this. Because I'm inside of a string and because I'm using Python, I can't use the curly brackets. So the hacky way to do this, which is, there's probably a cleaner way to do this in Python, but it's just to break out of our string, add this value, and then continue the string. And one other thing you'll know you have to do is you have to wrap this in a string value because it is an integer. So we need to convert our integer to a string. So now if I run this, what I will get is I will get all my videos, and I will also get a input string which I could then use down here, right? So now I can replace all of this with input string. And now, because of the way that this is Bash and Python, this will work just fine. Now I'll still have to update down here. So maybe what I'll do is let me run this cell first. I'll pause the video, and then we'll come down and fix this, because we need to update this value too. But what's funny is we could update this. I believe this would work. Input string, or sorry, end strips is what we want to do here. So before I get too far ahead of myself, let's just run this cell, and then we'll come down here and fix this and clean it up. So I'll be right back. Okay, so this ran. I actually ran it a second time because it didn't include a kind of important thing, or at least a thing that I wanted to check, which is I added this line at the very bottom that just says print input string. And I just wanted to output to make sure my input string looked correct. So if you go down here, you will see my input string is now being pumped out. And that looks correct to me. One other thing that I should note is that I actually had an error in here. When we last stopped, I had -i input string. And this is wrong because obviously -i won't work. So you have to remove that. End strips will work here. You'll see it's already being output, right? I can look at it and see that it's 8 right now. And then I wanted to change this to be strips.8 or -8. Now I still have this to deal with. This is only looking for 4 inputs. And apparently this works, and it does something strange, which I don't really understand what it's doing. I think it might be just taking 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 as assumptions for this. So the video actually output, I just tested this earlier, and it just output with like the rest of the video at the end. So let's do this. Let's actually edit these numbers. So let's go 2, 4, and then we'll do 6, and then we'll do 5, and then 7, right? So that works. So you could mess these up a little bit more if you wanted to. If you wanted this a little bit funkier, you could do something like this. You can move these numbers around a little bit. So you could also eventually write like a Python script to actually like automate the positions of these, like doing something like a random shuffle. I like that I have a little bit more control over this because I don't really want, well, here's an error. I don't want sequential numbers to go next to each other because that's going to look like the same video. So now I've shifted these around a little bit. So I can use end strips here. I can update my end strings, and I can just output this file. So I'm going to run this. I'll again pause the video, and we'll come back and look at this once it's finished. So see you in a second. All right, so my video is downloaded. Let's take a look at it. And you'll see we've got it working with 8 perfectly even strips. So we've built up ourselves a pretty flexible script in Python that could essentially allow us to do this with any video. And there's just a little bit of manual stuff to do within that v-stacking thing, but I bet maybe for your homework you could figure out how to automate that and have some interesting outputs. So this is like where I think the implementation of both Python and FFmpeg together can be really, really cool. Some stuff to talk about here is maybe a homework example for y'all is to figure out how to do this on both the X and the Y, right? So right now we're just doing strips across. What would it take to do a grid, like maybe a very even grid that also includes the Ys? It's going to include figuring out how to do this a little bit more, as well as automating this value and this value. So this is definitely going to get pretty complicated, but that's also where this input string is going to be really helpful. The challenge will be that you will have to then figure out how to do these stackings. And what I recommend you do is that you look at the code that's in the notebook that shows you how to do not there, but how to do multiple stacking, right? So this is how you do hstack. So this is a row. So you do 0 through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and then you use vstack to combine them. And one thing to remember is that your input count has to equal however many video inputs you're giving it. So just remember to do that. So that would be a cool little fun example if you are just starting to warm yourself up to Python. If you are a very good coder, a challenge that I have for you is maybe to generate something like this. So, okay, so what I did here, if we take a look at this video, is I used a random integer value to shuffle the width and the height of my X and Y values. Now, this was not fun, to implement in FFmpeg. Doing all the hstack and vstack ended up being a little bit more annoying than expected, but maybe you can give it a try and see if you can get something like this working. So yeah, I think there's a lot of power here. I think it's really cool to play with. And you have to sort of like slowly work your way through the Python parts and the FFmpeg parts. So if you're looking for something interesting to do this week, I think this is a really great idea. So next week, we'll look at maybe how to simplify this a little bit more using a complex filter that actually allows us to do some cropping. Probably not a crop like this, but something else maybe. So we can take a look at that. Yeah, so hopefully you have some fun and can generate some cool videos this week. And either way, I hope that whatever you make, that you drop in the Slack channel so that people can check it out. All right, see you next week.